I started the quarterback conversation talking about Jaden Daniels and what he was able to do as a rookie at the quarterback position. We have to start this one off, I guess, by mentioning, the greatest rookie tight end season of all time with Brock Bowers, who I believe when you were on last year, we joked about, getting that gold jacket ready. And doesn't seem like all that much of a joke anymore.
I wasn't joking.
Yeah. An absolutely extraordinary rookie season. And then we're moving into this year's prospects. We have seen some, a bit like the quarterbacks, again, a similar theme to how that show started off. We look at Sam LaPorta the year before, and people having instant success at the NFL level as tight ends and what they've been able to do. And then some players, it's taken them a couple of years, like a Trey McBride, but we're seeing a real crop of tight end talent come through from college, but more and more that are hitting really, really early and having those breakouts as rookies. Again, overall in this class, where are you looking at this tight end class versus some of the recent crops for the high end talent?
We don't have a Brock Bowers in this class.
There's not a Brock Bowers in the 2 years in a row.
That would be amazing. Oh my gosh. I will say, if you look at how the NFL is using tight ends and the depth of the tight end position, we're finally seeing it kind of fill out. We had 7 or 8 guys that had 700 or 800 yards last year. I can't remember the exact number, but the depth is going deeper and deeper, and so it's promising. And I think that's because of the development of the tight ends in college is just getting better and better. So we're seeing a larger number of these guys that can not only block, they can also be dynamic receivers. And if they are dynamic receivers, in many cases, they can also block now. There's balance to it. It's not just slot only, and it's not just blocking. It's guys that can be every down contributors at the tight end position. So I would say there's 2 profiles that are in the same galaxy as Brock Bowers, and that would be Tyler Warren of Penn State and Colston Loveland of Michigan. But the depth is really there this year too. I mean, that was on display at the Senior Bowl, but even some of the guys that got Shrine Bowl invites, it's just it's a really deep class that I'm intrigued by. 10 of these guys.
I like the fact that now we have to separate players into galaxies just to find out where they are.
Yes, he's within at least 4 light years.
Yeah. It's the game has been changed for measuring the metrics, but in terms of an older tight end that's coming in this year, a 5th-year breakout season from Tyler Warren, how are we judging the breakout time frame and the age that it happened at versus the kind of monstrous production that came along with it?
Yeah, and that is, that's legitimately concerning because when you map any kind of production metrics and the signal and where that signal lives and what you can count on at a wide receiver position, especially, it's once you get past year 4, year 5 and 6, it's there's not negative signal. It's not negative that it happened, but it's what does this actually mean that he blew up now? And that kind of holds true, less so at the tight end position, but still holds true a little bit. And that year 5 breakouts are kind of the success rate's not, great. And so there's some questions there, but from a practical on-field standpoint, NFL teams have been eyeing Tyler Warren and rating for scouting purposes Tyler Warren for multiple years before. There's a few different scouting services that teams use to do their pre-work in the draft, and so they'll get that now for next year, summer for next year, in different batches. And so he's been on the radar for quite a while for a guy that says he checks all the boxes already. Physically, we want this guy to be on our team. And then when he blew up as a 5th-year player, it makes it an easy decision for NFL teams to go, oh, okay, this guy that we already saw with the potential 2 years prior, he didn't break out. Now he freaking did. And he was scoring rushing touchdowns on top of the receiving touchdowns and 1,400 plus yards from scrimmage. He to me is an easy 1st-round pick despite the later breakout.
Is it something where we talk a lot at different times about how this receiver had their production knocked a little bit by teammates? You don't tend to have college teams with additional tight ends the level of Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange. Is that the case, or is that kind of beside the point?
As to why he may have broken out later, you mean?
Right.
I would say definitely, because most of the time you're talking about offenses that run straight up 11 personnel. 12 personnel is heavier than it was even just a couple years ago. But yeah, that definitely contributed to a slower breakout when teams are kind of going with their already really impressive athletic tight ends who are slightly older than him or more experienced than him. So yeah, I'd say that definitely contributes.
So you mentioned Loveland. This is a guy where, again, as a non-college football player, you look at the profile and it feels very trappy to me in that you've got these crazy yards per route numbers, which you're like, oh, this is awesome. But then you look at the evasion metrics. I mean, one of the things about Brock Bowers is, he's unstoppable like every single play. Just the numbers are so far off the charts that they seem silly. Loveland, basically, at least the way that SIS charts it, which doesn't mean that that's going to square with how everyone else is looking at this, but it's not just the numbers aren't great. I mean, there's almost nothing there at all, which worries me when we're looking at the tight end position. Is that a real worry, or are the numbers there kind of pushing me in the wrong direction?
You mean like after the catch? Like
after the catch.
Yeah, I mean it's not impressive. It's like yak per target and yak per reception numbers are not on par with like Brock Bowers or even like normal like early first round projected tight ends. But I would say what's more impressive are his volume and compared to the wide receivers that he's playing alongside and how he's still finding ways to get open before he has the ball in his hands. In many cases, it's Michigan's scheming at creatively getting him open, but sometimes it's just him forcing his way open against a defensive back that you wouldn't have thought he could do that on. And so when I look back to this last year, Michigan was outside the top 100 by most every single meaningful passing metric ever because they had 3 different quarterbacks and none of them were quarterbacks. And yet Loveland still actually found a way to produce and almost outproduced his entire wide receiver core on his team, like as the tight end. So he was the de facto wide receiver 1 for the team, and the quarterback or quarterbacks could not find him all year long. And yet he still found ways to win. And so that, to me, when you can produce with a first rounder like JJ McCarthy and find ways to get open and eclipse all the market share thresholds we want to see, and then with no quarterback at all, still succeed, that's impressive to me. And that was an absolute mess. I mean, they tried Davis Warren and Jack Tuttle and Alex Orji, and it was the worst Michigan season like of quarterback play this decade, maybe like ever. And compared to the year before with a first rounder, it just was so odd watching that play out. But Loveland is certainly a top 40 profile to me.
Harold Fannin's numbers are pretty absurd when you look at what he did. Plus his Senior Bowl was pretty crazy to go along with it. How are you viewing him, and does he translate as a tight end at the NFL level?
Yeah, there were a lot of concerns about his size coming in. He was at a good weight. He's a little shorter than what you typically see. I really am intrigued to see what his long speed looks like because at the Senior Bowl, again, with the player tracking data, he looked like the most athletic tight end on the field, dating back to 2018 of all Senior Bowl tight ends in that span. So to me, that's pretty impressive. Now, if you do like any kind of size adjusted stuff, it might not be as impressive. Like once we get into the 40 and like really break down his hard, agility times or whatever. I'm just intrigued to see how well he tests there because it could be pretty special. And if it is, I think a team's going to take a chance and just be like, yeah, he can just be a jumbo slot and, get in the way of blockers as an inline when we ask him to. But I talked to him about the record. It was funny. He didn't even know how close he was to the record until like 3 weeks to go in the season. And then his coaches were like, hey, man, we might just toss you some targets here because you're getting really close. And so he just laughed about how funny it was because like his last game he had, double digit, something crazy across. I think it was 17 receptions, something dumb in his last game. And it just because they wanted to crush the record. And so he's just a really humble guy that, he went to Bowling Green, so you better be, but like to do what he did, even against the lower level competition, 1,500 plus yards as a tight end, like that's just that's alien level stuff. Like you shouldn't be able to even do that at any level of college play.
He had 17 receptions in that final game.
Oh, there you go. Off the top of my head. There we go.
I mean, could he be the best guy? I mean, obviously anybody could be good, but
yes,
is he gapped down from these top two guys? And the reason I asked that, I mean, it seems like the concerns would be, I mean, Zay Jones had crazy receiving numbers, a small school. He has played a little bit successfully at the NFL, but obviously is not an impact player at the NFL. You also think about Fannin and think like, what's the best case? Well, the best case is that you're used like Mike Gesicki, where you're basically just a receiver, but then most of the time your team forgets that you're even that. That doesn't translate into the production. And even those things we might consider in some ways to be above average outcomes. And yet, and the numbers, and then again, as you mentioned, the tracking, I mean, it seems like we could actually have just a really special outcome. Or is he not big enough to do that?
Oh, man, I think the best case scenario just happened this past year. You joked about Mike Gesicki, but also in his like Dolphins years, like, he wasn't really utilized there. But Jonnu Smith of the Dolphins this year, that's the best case scenario for Harold Fannin. But like to do that much earlier in his career because, he doesn't get drafted by the Titans.
Yeah, I was going to say, we just have to wait 9 years for it to happen.
Yeah. No, you just don't get drafted by the Titans and have them waste the first 4 years of your career. But that's probably the most important key. But I think there's a real path where he's a really, high impact player, especially given how the NFL has just fully embraced how to use these big body athletes at the position now, because we just see it way, way more. It's not just this gimmick type deal that only 3 or 4 teams are using. It's like, there's probably 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 teams. They're like, we run 11 personnel or like we'll run 12, but it's actually 11 because we have a freaking slot wide receiver who also just happens to be 6'3", 250. And so I think he would fit in that perfect role with a lot of teams. So yes, to answer your question, he could be the best. I don't rank him there. He is my tight end 3, but he could be the best when it's all said and done for sure.
So we have another, I mean, probably not accurate to label these guys sleepers, but maybe some people with some high-end outcomes. Elijah Arroyo, you get the year 4 breakout, got that excellent boom rate, receiver rating, first down percentage, drop rate, all of those different things. In my notes, I have the Senior Bowl tracking wasn't great, but then I look at that and he's a faster max time than Restrepo that roils some these wide receivers. So I mean, obviously it's not poor, but it's kind of this contrast with he had an insane number. And again, when you're talking about max times for the players on field tracking, it's virtually always when a guy's gotten away for a long score. And so you have that time to build up to your max. But when you're talking about a tight end having one of the fastest times in all of college football last year, that catches your eye. Is this a big time prospect?
Yeah. And actually, so I put together, I don't know if you guys saw, I put together a kind of composite using the tracking data from the Senior Bowl that not only looked at the max, but looked at their acceleration, deceleration data, among other things, to kind of combine into one composite score. And like I mentioned, Fannin was the most impressive one of the bunch. But Elijah Arroyo actually was around the 66th percentile for all the tight ends dating back to 2018. So when more than just like the max, but even like what he was doing in and out of breaks, throttling down, throttling up, out of, it just overall, he still had a really intriguing
very
profile.
good. When I saw that max time, I was like, maybe this guy's going to be like 98th percentile.
Yeah.
It wasn't that.
Yeah, and I don't think he's that necessarily, but I think he's going to have plenty of long speed, and he gets open way too easy for a guy of his size, 250 plus pounds, 6'4" plus, and so I think at worst, I think we're looking at a profile that's tight end 5 in the class, but he could be tight end 4, if not tight end 3, alongside in that same tier of Fannin.
Next up is Mason Taylor, somebody who, I don't know, there's a lot of, I think, concerns in terms of his after the catch play, mediocre to poor athleticism. I'm not hyping him up here enough, but is there anything that I'm missing with him?
Well, so I would just say he's one of those who is jack of all trades and master of none, who can just do everything well. So if a team needs him to be a jumbo slot, he's going to be fine at that. If a team needs him to be an inline hand in the dirt guy who punches, defensive lineman in the face. He can do that. So I think he's going to be somebody that earns a role, and he's going to rank pretty highly on a lot of big boards because he just has an incredibly balanced skill set, and he's been doing kind of all of the things you want a tight end to do since his freshman year. And so I think by the numbers that us nerds care about, like he's just never going to be one that pops. Even after the combine, he might not be somebody who's like, oh man, that's a slam dunk profile. And yet kind of a lot of the Hawkinson profile, like that, if I'm remembering correctly, he's still got like top 5 capital. I'm not saying Mason's going to do that, but Mason, checks a lot of boxes. So even if he's like a 4-7 guy, he's going to be given opportunities.
When I'm looking at Gunnar Helm here, one of the things I'm thinking back to are your notes on Quinn Ewers in the QB discussion. But the thing that is interesting to me is that, like Jatavian Sanders the previous season, his per play numbers, not in every category, but in a bunch of categories, are better than these receivers who are getting, a lot of buzz. He's got a bunch of touchdowns on vertical passes. He's strong after the catch. Is this the guy who maybe is going to go late enough because the class is deeper and ends up being someone who scores a lot right away? And how should we be looking at this from a fantasy perspective, sort of rookie drafts, how we're putting these guys together? One of the things that I have always liked to do is to acquire a number of second round picks and then use at least one of them on kind of the standout tight end. And then you end up with a bunch of Trey McBrides and all of these other guys that are good. And you can dominate the tight end position without spending a lot. But then but you would only do that with like the top 2 or 3 guys. Is this a 6-7 person class where you might even just say, wait till round 3 of your rookie draft to start stashing these guys because the profiles are good enough?
I think so. Cause I mean, like you're going to get into, round 2, and it's going to be a lot of those running backs that we kind of talked about on the running back episode, just because there's so many of those good guys and everyone wants a piece of that puzzle. Whereas Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland will go off the board, maybe Harold Fannin, maybe Elijah Arroyo. But like once we get outside that mark, then you've got a bunch of guys that are probably tiered together for a lot of people in this space who are going to be looking at fantasy value. So yeah, it's round 3, even round 4, I think, for a lot of these tight ends who might actually get, back end of the round 3 capital in the real NFL draft. I think there's a big group of tight ends that could all go in between picks 80 and 120 and should all kind of be valued similarly. With Helm, though, I think he actually has a lot of value as a blocker and could be an every down tight end, maybe even more so than anybody in the class except for like a Tyler Warren, in terms of like you never have to take him off the field for any reason. Whereas you might he could be the guy who stays on the field in 11 personnel and then the receiving threat comes on in 12, because he's that kind of important kind of body. When I cover, SEC teams every single week. And oftentimes when I would cover a team who was playing Texas, it was like Gunnar Helm that they were talking about. Oftentimes, even more so than the receivers, because it's like he's kind of a weird mismatch player. You have to account for vertical receivers against everybody, but tight ends can be a mismatch play. And so there's certainly a path for him to get round 3 capital. I don't think he's going to get round 2 capital like some thought he might for a moment. But yeah, I think he's certainly in that range where I would definitely take a shot in round 3 because he has that every kind of down rate, even if like his per route run numbers might be great because he keeps into block a whole lot because his value is there too. So yeah, he's just kind of like an older school tight end to me. That feels like a player that might have been drafted in 2007, much higher than he's going to be drafted this year.
Anyone else? You got some deep sleeper for us, or a priority pick beyond the names we mentioned?
I would say that you got to keep an eye on guys like Terrence Ferguson of Oregon, who he might actually have the best play of any tight end at the Senior Bowl. And this is not me saying just because of that play, but I think it was kind of a smaller safety, just basically grabbed his arm and yanked it away from him. And he pulled the ball in with one hand as he was diving to the ground. And it's like, okay, he's got the ball skills and he's got the body to be an every down tight end. And I think he's just overlooked because of a lot of the speedsters there at Oregon. But I think he's going to be somebody that could get that round 4 capital and be like that profile that is not incredibly athletic and that everyone overlooks and goes undrafted, maybe even in dynasty rookie drafts, a la like the it's Dalton Schultz was for a little bit, and then like produces for you for a good few years. And it's that kind of profile, and it's really useful. Jake Brenningstool out of Clemson is another guy who added weight. Finally, he was kind of skinny coming out of high school. He's actually from the Middle Tennessee area where I'm from, but he's really added weight, and he's a legit 6'6" and has speed to really break free. I think not sure he's going to test, but he in terms of practical on-field speed, he can break free. So I'm interested in both of those guys quite a bit. And then one kind of sleeper that he was a Shrine Bowl guy, always injured, basketball player though. So you're gonna, that matters. Luke Lachey out of Iowa is somebody that for a long time I actually had him as like tight end 3 or 4 in this class until he just kind of couldn't ever really get over the injury bug and couldn't ever break out the way I thought he could or should. But he's one that I would not be surprised if we're kind of sleeping on him. He's a round 4 rookie pick or undrafted, and all of a sudden he's like the tight end 2 or 3 in this class 2 years from now.
And just as we go, the Utah tight end injuries there take him completely off the board. It just seems so interesting, some of the things he's done in the past, but obviously just catastrophic injuries throughout his career.
Yeah, and he's really he's short too. I'm not sure what his legit height is. Combine invites are probably going to be out by the time the show's even out, like maybe even before we're done today. But I'm curious how tall he is. Like he's maybe not even 6'2". Like I'm not sure, and so that's probably going to bite him as well. I mean, he was really fun, but I just don't see it working out.